Hey, revelation chasers. If unfiltered confessions and unbreakable bonds pull you in, subscribe and let's decode the heart's hidden scripts. I was standing in our kitchen in Palo Alto, 6 months pregnant, my hands trembling as I held the note I'd just written for my husband. That's how we communicated, how we'd always communicated. Through written words, through sign language, through touches and glances. David was deaf, had been since a motorcycle accident 5 years before we met, or so I'd believed for the past year and a half of our relationship. He was reading the note over my shoulder, close enough that I could feel his breath on my neck, when he said clear as day in a voice I'd never heard before, "Sarah, I need to tell you something." I dropped the note. The paper fluttered to the floor between us, and I watched it fall like I was in a dream or a nightmare because my deaf husband had just spoken. Let me go back. Let me tell you how I got here. Standing in that kitchen, my whole world cracking apart like thin ice. I'm 68 years old now, and I've learned that some stories need to be told from the beginning, even when the beginning is painful to remember. It was 1991, and I was 32 years old. Still single, still working as a junior architect at a firm in San Francisco, still living in a cramped studio apartment I could barely afford. My mother called me every Sunday like clockwork, and every Sunday the conversation somehow circled back to the same topic. "Your sister Jennifer just told me she's expecting again. That'll be 3 grandchildren she's given me. Sarah, 3. That's wonderful, Mom. The Johnsons' daughter just got engaged. Remember Amy? You two used to play together. She's 26. I'd grip the phone tighter, stare out my window at the fog rolling in over the bay. I'm happy for Amy. I just don't understand what you're waiting for. You're not getting any younger. Men don't want to marry women in their 30s who... Mom, I have to go. I have work to finish. But she was relentless. And if I'm being honest with myself, after 3 decades of marriage and raising 2 children of my own, I can admit that I was lonely. Tired of coming home to an empty apartment. Tired of watching my colleagues leave early for their kids' soccer games while I stayed late to meet deadlines. Tired of being the only single person at every family gathering. So when my mother told me about David Evans, I listened. He's the son of Helen Evans. You remember Helen? She was in my book club. Her son started some kind of computer company. Very successful, very handsome, and he's ready to settle down. Mom, I'm not going on another one of your blind dates. This is different. He's special, Sarah. He had an accident a few years ago, a motorcycle accident. He lost his hearing. Something in her voice made me pause. He's deaf completely, but he's learned to adapt. He reads lips beautifully, and he knows sign language. Helen says he's the same charming man he always was, just quieter. A lot of women don't want to deal with that, but I thought you might be different. You've always been so patient, so understanding. I should have heard the manipulation in those words, but instead I heard an opportunity. A man who wouldn't judge me for being 32 and unmarried. A man who might be grateful for someone willing to learn sign language to adapt to his world. A man who, because of his disability, might actually see me for who I was instead of what I wasn't. Okay, I said, 1 dinner. David Evans was everything my mother had promised and more. Tall with dark hair starting to gray at the temples, sharp brown eyes that watched my lips when I spoke. He wore expensive suits that fit perfectly, drove a Mercedes, and worked in Silicon Valley doing something with computer software that I didn't quite understand. Our first dinner was at an upscale Italian restaurant in San Jose. I'd spent 2 weeks learning basic sign language from a book, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror, but David made it easy. He'd brought a small notepad and pen, and when my clumsy signing failed, we wrote back and forth like teenagers passing notes in class. Your mother talks about you constantly, he wrote. The brilliant architect daughter, the stubborn one who won't settle down. I laughed, a little embarrassed. She makes me sound like a prize mare she's trying to sell. He smiled, and when he wrote his next message, I felt something shift in my chest. She undersold you. We started dating, if you could call it that. We'd meet for dinners, take walks along the beach, go to movies where we'd sit side by side in the dark, and I'd forget that he couldn't hear the dialogue. He'd read the subtitles when they appeared, and sometimes he'd take my hand and squeeze it during romantic scenes. I learned sign language properly, taking evening classes after work. David was patient with me, correcting my hand positions gently, his fingers warm against mine as he showed me the right way to sign love or tomorrow or beautiful. His mother, Helen, was thrilled. She invited us for Sunday dinners at her enormous house in Los Gatos, where she'd watch us sign to each other across the table with tears in her eyes. I was so worried he'd never find anyone, she told me one evening when David had stepped outside to take a call, or so I thought. I learned later he was just checking something on his pager. After the accident, he withdrew so much, stopped seeing his friends, broke up with his girlfriend, Amanda. She said she couldn't handle being with someone who was deaf. Can you imagine the cruelty of that? I couldn't. I thought about Amanda often in those early months. What kind of person abandons someone they love because of a disability? What kind of shallow, selfish woman was she? 8 months into our relationship, David proposed, not with words. He couldn't speak after all, or so I believed. He took me to the beach at sunset, where he'd written in the sand in enormous letters, "Will you marry me, Sarah?" I cried. I signed yes over and over. And when he slipped the ring onto my finger, a beautiful diamond that must have cost 3 months of my salary, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. We got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at a chapel in Napa Valley. It was beautiful, intimate, just our immediate families and closest friends. The ceremony was conducted with a sign language interpreter, and when we exchanged vows, I signed mine with tears streaming down my face. I'd found my person, my partner, a man who saw me for who I truly was, who valued patience and kindness over small talk and superficial charm. A man who communicated with me in the most intentional way possible. Every word written or signed with purpose, with thought. Our wedding night, I expected him to speak. Isn't that what happens in stories? The curse is broken, the spell is lifted. But David remained silent. He communicated with his hands both in sign language and in other ways I won't describe. And I fell asleep in our hotel room feeling cherished and complete. We moved into a house in Palo Alto, a real house with a backyard and a guest room and an office where I could spread out my blueprints. David's software company was doing well, very well. He was talking, or rather his business partners were talking about going public within a year. I cut back my hours at the architecture firm. Helen suggested it, and David agreed enthusiastically in his silent way. "You'll want to be home more once the babies come," Helen said over Sunday dinner, patting my hand. I got pregnant 4 months after the wedding. We were trying, or rather, we weren't preventing it. And when the 2 pink lines appeared on the test, I ran to find David in his home office. I was crying, laughing, trying to sign and fumbling it, finally just showing him the test. His face lit up. He pulled me into his lap, kissed me, held me so tight I could barely breathe. Then he pulled back and signed slowly and clearly, "You'll be an amazing mother." The pregnancy was harder than I'd expected, morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made it difficult to work. At 5 months, I quit the architecture firm. It was just too much, the commute, the long hours, the physical demands of site visits. David was supportive, of course. He made more than enough money for both of us. Helen was thrilled. "Now you can focus on what really matters," she said, helping me fold tiny onesies in what would become the nursery. Being a wife and mother. That's a woman's true calling. I was folding a yellow onesie with ducks on it, feeling the baby kick inside me, when something occurred to me. "Helen, did you work after you had David?" Oh, of course not. David's father wouldn't have allowed it. A man needs to know his wife is taking care of the home. David's father was how she always referred to her ex-husband. They divorced when David was in college, a scandal Helen rarely discussed. But she mentioned him that day, and something about her tone made me uncomfortable. "Well, David and I discussed it, and we both agreed this was best," I said firmly, even though we hadn't really discussed it. We'd written about it, signed about it, but was that the same as a real conversation? Could you have a real conversation in sign language with someone you'd only known for a year? 6 months pregnant, exhausted, and hormonal. I was making dinner, grilled chicken and vegetables, David's favorite, when he walked into the kitchen. I just finished writing him a note asking if he wanted white or red wine with dinner even though I couldn't drink. I was trying to maintain normality, trying to be a good wife. He came up behind me so close I could feel his warmth. I held up the note over my shoulder and he said, "Sarah, I need to tell you something." The note fell from my fingers. Time seemed to stop. I turned slowly, my pregnant belly bumping against the counter. David was standing there looking at me with those brown eyes, his mouth moving, sounds coming out, real sounds, real words. "I'm not deaf," he said. "I never was." I couldn't process it, couldn't make the words make sense. My deaf husband was speaking. My deaf husband just told me he wasn't deaf. My deaf husband, "I can hear you perfectly," he continued. His voice was deep, smooth, educated, a voice that had been there all along, hidden. "I've been able to hear everything this whole time." My legs went weak. I grabbed the counter for support. The baby kicked hard, as if reacting to my sudden spike in heart rate. "What?" I whispered or thought I whispered. I wasn't sure any sound came out. "Let me explain." "What?" Louder now, definitely louder. "What did you just say?" David held up his hands, palms out, a gesture that suddenly seemed ominous instead of gentle. "Please, let me explain. There's a reason." "You're not deaf." It wasn't a question. I was stating a fact, trying to make it real in my mind. "You were never deaf." "No, I wasn't. The motorcycle accident never happened. Well, I did have a motorcycle accident when I was 19, but I was fine. Just some road rash. Nothing serious." I felt like I was watching this conversation from outside my body. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. "You've been lying to me for almost 2 years." It wasn't lying exactly. It was more like a test. "A test?" The word hung in the air between us like poison gas. "A test," I repeated. My voice sounded strange, distant. "My mother's idea, actually. After Amanda left me, my ex-girlfriend, I was devastated. I thought we were going to get married and then she just left. Said I was too focused on work, not romantic enough, not exciting enough." He was talking faster now, the words tumbling out like he'd been storing them up for months, which I realized with growing horror he had been. "So, we came up with this plan. I'd pretend to be deaf. Any woman who couldn't handle that, who couldn't learn sign language, who got frustrated with the communication barrier, she wasn't right for me. But someone who did stick around, who learned my language, who was patient and understanding, that was someone special." "And you found her," I said numbly. "You found your special someone. How wonderful for you. Does your mother know that you're not actually deaf?" He hesitated, just a moment, but it was enough. "Oh my God." I backed away from him, my hands instinctively going to my belly. "Your mother knows. She's known this whole time. The tears at dinner. The gratitude that I accepted you despite your disability. That was all part of it. She was trying to help me find the right person by lying." I was trying to protect David. "You were trying to control him, control who he married. Make sure she was submissive enough, patient enough, grateful enough to put up with whatever you two decided to dish out." She left, but she kept calling. So did David. So did my mother, though I'd stopped answering her calls too. I was alone with my growing belly and my rage and my grief, because it was grief. The man I'd married didn't exist. The relationship I'd built was with a fiction. Every sign language conversation, every written note, every moment of silent understanding, all of it was tainted now. Had he laughed at me when I practiced my signing in front of him, messing up the hand positions? Did he find it amusing when I worked so hard to communicate with him? Did he think I was stupid for not figuring it out? And worse, much worse, did I even know him at all? What else had he lied about? What other parts of David Evans were fictional? Jennifer was worried about me. "You're not eating enough. You're not sleeping. This stress isn't good for the baby. None of this is good for the baby. You need to talk to him. Work something out. You're married. You're having his child." I don't even know if I want to be married to him anymore. The words hung in the air. Jennifer looked stricken. "Sarah, you don't mean that." But I did, or I thought I did. I didn't know what I meant anymore. Dr. Susan Lee was the therapist Jennifer found for me. A calm woman in her 50s who specialized in complex relationship issues. I liked that she didn't say marriage counseling, because I wasn't sure I wanted to counsel the marriage as much as bury it. "Tell me what happened. Dr. Lee said in our first session. I told her everything. The whole story poured out, my loneliness before meeting David, the pressure from my mother, the relief of finding someone who seemed to see past my age and unmarried status, learning sign language, quitting my job, the pregnancy, the reveal. Dr. Lee listened without interrupting, her face neutral. When I finished, she said, "That's quite a betrayal." I started crying again. I'd been crying for 2 weeks straight, it seemed. He says it was a test to find someone who would love him for himself. And how do you feel about that? I feel like I was a contestant on some sick game show where I didn't know I was competing. Dr. Lee nodded. That's valid. Your consent was violated. You entered into a relationship under false pretenses. Finally, someone who understood. But I need to ask you something, Sarah, and I want you to really think about the answer. She leaned forward slightly. In those 8 months before you married, during the time you were dating David, did you love him? Of course I did. That's why I married him. Why did you love him? Because he was kind and thoughtful and patient, and because he was deaf. I stopped. No, of course not. Are you sure? Because from what you've described, the deaf man David was pretending to be had very specific qualities. He was quiet. He communicated deliberately. He couldn't interrupt you or talk over you. He had to really listen or appear to listen to everything you wrote or signed. He seemed patient because he had no choice but to be. He seemed thoughtful because every communication required thought. That's not, I didn't. I'm not saying you're a bad person, Sarah. I'm saying that the reasons we're attracted to people are complicated. And sometimes the very things we think we love about someone are actually the things we've projected onto them. I sat with that for a long moment. Was she right? Had I fallen in love with David's silence, with the fact that he couldn't judge me out loud, couldn't criticize, couldn't voice the disappointment I'd seen in every other man's face when they realized I was 32 and single and maybe a little too independent? He still lied, I said finally. Yes, he did, and that's not okay. But the question isn't whether what he did was wrong. It clearly was. The question is what you want to do now. What did I want to do? I was 7 months pregnant by that point. My belly was huge, my ankles were swollen, and I was living off Jennifer's charity and my dwindling savings. David had offered to keep paying all the bills, but I'd refused. Taking his money felt like accepting the lie. I don't know if I can ever trust him again, I said. That's fair. Trust once broken is very difficult to rebuild. But it's not impossible if, and this is a big if, both people are willing to do the work. What work? Brutal honesty, complete transparency, accountability, and time. A lot of time. I thought about that as I drove home, well, to Jennifer's house, which was home now. Could I do that work? Did I want to? The baby kicked hard and I put my hand on my belly. What do you think? Should we give your father a chance? Another kick. I took it as a yes, or maybe just gas. It was hard to tell. David came to therapy with me the following week. It was the first time I'd seen him in a month, and he looked terrible. Thinner, gray under his eyes. His usually immaculate suit was wrinkled. He started to sign something automatically, then caught himself. Sorry, Habit. Don't, I said sharply. Don't you dare use sign language with me again. His hands dropped. Okay. Dr. Lee gave us ground rules. I could ask any question, and David had to answer honestly no matter what. He couldn't leave until the session was over, and we both had to commit to coming back. Why, I asked first, not the about finding true love, the real reason. Why did you do this to me? David looked at his hands, then at Dr. Lee, then finally at me. Because I'm a coward. I hadn't expected that. Amanda didn't leave me because I wasn't romantic enough. She left me because I'm boring, Sarah. I'm good with computers and numbers, but I'm terrible with people. Small talk makes me anxious. Social situations exhaust me. I'm awkward and stiff, and I never know what to say. So, you decided to say nothing at all. Yes, he met my eyes. Being deaf gave me an excuse. I didn't have to make conversation at parties. I didn't have to be charming. I could just exist. And people would think I was strong and brave instead of weird and antisocial. And I was what? Your perfect disabled husband accessory. Someone to take care of you and make you look good. No, you were amazing, Sarah. Smart and talented and beautiful, way out of my league. But as a deaf man, I had a chance. You saw me as someone who needed you, someone you could help, and I took advantage of that because I'm selfish and scared, and I didn't think about how it would affect you. I wanted to hit him or scream at him or both. You're right, I said instead. You are a coward and selfish, and you stole almost 2 years of my life. I know. You watched me give up my career. I know. And that was wrong. If you want to go back to architecture, I'll support that financially, logistically, whatever you need. I'm about to have a baby, David. I can't exactly start a new job right now. Then after, whenever you're ready, I'll hire a nanny. I'll take parenting leave, whatever it takes. Dr. Lee intervened. David, what Sarah is saying is that the consequences of your deception are real and lasting. You can't just fix them with money or promises. I know, he looked at me again. I know I can't fix this, but I want to try if you'll let me. I didn't answer, couldn't answer. We went to therapy every week, sometimes twice a week. David answered every question I asked, no matter how painful. Did he laugh at me? Sometimes, yes, when I messed up signs badly. Did he read my private journals? No, never. And he seemed genuinely hurt that I'd think he would. Did he love me? Yes. He said yes with tears in his eyes, and I wanted to believe him, but I didn't know how. 8 months pregnant, I moved back home. Not home to Jennifer's, home to the house in Palo Alto, David's house, our house, whatever. But I had conditions. He slept in the guest room. We weren't together. We were 2 people cohabitating until I figured out what I wanted to do. That's fine, David said. Whatever you need. The baby came 3 weeks later. A girl, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a healthy set of lungs that she demonstrated immediately. They placed her on my chest. This tiny, perfect thing, and I looked up to find David crying in the corner of the delivery room. Do you want to hold her? I asked. He nodded, unable to speak. Actually unable to speak this time, choked up with emotion. I handed our daughter to him and watched his face transform into something I'd never seen before. Wonder, pure unfiltered wonder. She's perfect, he whispered. She's ours, I said. We named her Grace, Grace Sarah Evans, and she changed everything. Not immediately. I was still angry, still hurt, still wasn't sure if I could forgive him. But Grace needed both of us. And in those early exhausted weeks of midnight feedings and diaper changes and endless crying, hers and mine, David was there. He was there in ways I hadn't expected. Patient with Grace's screaming, calm when I was falling apart, competent with bottles and burp cloths and everything. I was terrified I'd mess up, I said one night, 3 weeks after bringing Grace home. It was 2:00 a.m. Grace had finally fallen asleep after an hour of crying, and David and I were sitting in the nursery, too tired to move. You're good at this. I had to be, he said quietly. I knew I'd already messed up with you. I couldn't mess up with her too. We kept going to Dr. Lee, sometimes with Grace in a baby carrier, sleeping through our sessions, and slowly, painfully, we started to build something new. Not the relationship we had before, that was gone, dead, built on lies, but something else, something honest. I'm still angry, I told him 6 months after Grace was born. I know. I don't know if that will ever go away completely. I know. I need you to understand that you don't get to control this, the timeline, the forgiveness, any of it. You did enough controlling already. I understand. And he did somehow. He gave me space when I needed it. He was there when I needed that instead. He went to therapy himself, working through whatever childhood trauma made him think lying was an acceptable relationship strategy. His mother was a different story. I didn't speak to Helen for a year. She'd call, leave messages, send cards. I ignored all of it. Finally, when Grace was 14 months old, I agreed to meet her for coffee. She looked older, more fragile, but her voice was strong when she said, I owe you an apology. Yes, you do. I thought I was helping David, protecting him, But I was really just trying to control his life like I couldn't control my own marriage, and I hurt you terribly in the process. I'm sorry, Sarah. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. If you want to have a relationship with your granddaughter, I said carefully, you need to understand that I'm not the submissive, grateful daughter-in-law you thought you were getting. I have opinions, I have boundaries, and I will not tolerate any more manipulation. I understand. And you need to get therapy, real therapy, because whatever made you think that test was okay is not something I want around my daughter. Helen looked like I'd slapped her, but she nodded. I'll find someone. She did, actually found a therapist and started working through her control issues. It didn't fix everything. Helen and I would never be close, but it made family gatherings bearable. My mother was harder. She still insisted she was just trying to help, that she didn't really know the extent of David's deception. We're cordial now, but something broke between us that never fully healed. David and I had another baby 3 years after Grace, a boy we named Michael. And somehow, in the chaos of 2 kids and sleepless nights and endless laundry, we found our way to something that looked like love. Real love. Not the fairy tale I'd imagined when I was 32 and lonely, but something messier, harder, more honest. We renewed our vows on our 10-year anniversary. A small ceremony, just us and the kids and a few close friends. No sign language interpreter this time, just words, real spoken words. I promise to never lie to you again, David said. Even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when it makes me look bad, even when I'm scared. I promise to keep choosing you, I said. Even when I'm angry, even when I remember, even when it would be easier to leave. That was 28 years ago. We're 68 and 65 now. Grace is married with 2 kids of her own. Michael just got engaged. And David and I are still here, still working on it, still choosing each other. It hasn't been easy. Some days I still feel the ghost of that betrayal. Some days I look at him across the breakfast table and remember the moment in the kitchen when my world fell apart. Some days I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd left, if I'd started over, if I'd never forgiven him. But then I think about Grace's wedding last year, watching David walk our daughter down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. I think about Michael calling to ask his dad's advice on engagement rings. I think about the quiet evenings on our porch, David's hand in mine, talking about nothing and everything. I think about the fact that we talk now. We really talk about feelings and fears and mistakes about the past and the future and the messy present. We talk in a way I never did with the silent man I thought I married. And I realized that maybe Dr. Lee was right. Maybe I fell in love with the idea of David, not the real person. And maybe he fell in love with the idea of me too, the patient, understanding woman who would accept him as he pretended to be. But we stayed long enough to meet each other for real, and we chose to love those people instead. The real flawed, complicated people we actually are. Was it worth it? I don't know. Some days yes, some days no, but it's my life, the one I chose, the one I keep choosing.